Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Mike Pence spent 7 hours testifying before special counsel Jack Smith yesterday in the grand jury. You see his SUV leaving on the left side of your screen. On the right side of your screen, you see what Donald Trump was up to just a short time after that. During a campaign event in New Hampshire, his attention was called to a woman who spent more than 160 days in prison for storming the Capitol as part of Trump's violent insurrection.
She's a J6. She's a J6.
Take this.
Thank you, sir.
You just take care of this house.
I'm good.
That woman, as you might guess, is a Trump superfan. She follows him around from city to city like he's a Grateful Dead. And in fact, she's such a devoted fan that she even stormed the U.S. Capitol at his behest. She brought a backpack that he signed. You can see her here during the riot on top of the inauguration scaffold. She is proudly waving two flags, one a Troops for Trump flag, the other a QAnon flag. She told NBC News her only regret is not more forcefully resisting the 6 police officers it took to remove her from that scaffolding. And just so it's crystal clear exactly how she feels, this woman that Trump gave the attaboy to, she talked with her own Vaughn Hilliard at a Trump rally last September, just 6 days before she was found guilty and sentenced to prison.
Those were domestic terrorists inside our Capitol, and I'm going to prove it on my trial.
Who are the domestic terrorists?
Our Congress that's been stealing elections for a very long time. Our country's been under admiralty law since 1871.
What should the punishment for those members of Congress be?
Execution for being traitors. That's what our Constitution demands. Our Constitution demands that traitors in our nation are executed. And that's what should happen to each and every person that hijacked the voice of we the people.
Is that something that you see actually happening?
Yes.
Okay, so this woman, just before conviction, was calling for the execution of public officials, as you saw there. And in New Hampshire today, she told NBC News that she, quote, would like a front seat of Mike Pence being executed, which, of course, is what the insurrectionists themselves wanted on January 6th. They chanted it. They called for the hanging of Mike Pence, the man presiding over the peaceful transfer of power, though they made sure it wasn't peaceful. A man who was, at the time that they were chanting that, sheltering at the basement loading dock, unsure of who to trust amidst an attempted coup. And the stakes here for Pence, and frankly for the country, are pretty clear. Donald Trump did nearly everything in his power to endanger the life of his own vice president on January 6, 2021, in order to pressure Pence into enacting the coup. When Pence did not do that, Trump made sure he would feel the wrath of the crowd, the wrath of women like that one that he hugged today, whose backpack that she brought to the Capitol riot he signed, who he offered encouragement to today. And now Mike Pence wants to be president. He has given his testimony about the decision not to go along with the coup plot, as the serially feckless Republican Party falls in line behind the man who attempted to kill American democracy and, well, urged on a crowd that wanted to kill Mike Pence. Pence has the opportunity to live up to what he is happy to term as his noble calling and help the ex-president join the ranks of the January 6 convicts like this woman he embraced. Joining me now are two people who played a major role in the January 6 investigation. Timothy Hafey is the former chief investigative counsel for the Select Committee. John Wood served as the panel's senior investigative counsel and was counsel to then Vice Chair Liz Cheney. Both are former U.S. attorneys, one Democrat and one Republican. John, let me go to you first, and I'll go to you, Timothy, after that. John, the significance of Mike Pence and in terms of what he knows, and more than that, exactly how forthcoming he is under testimony. People can be compliant with a subpoena in a kind of inside the box way, or they could share everything they know. And I suspect you know the difference between those two.
Yeah, some of it's a matter of how the questions are asked. So if I were putting Vice President Pence in front of the grand jury, I would try to ask very specific questions and try to get the vice president to be as granular as possible in describing his conversations with President Trump. So ask questions like, what did President Trump say? Then what did you say? Then what happened next? Try and keep it as factual and chronological as possible. Because if you ask him open-ended questions, then he might try to talk about how proud he is of all that he and President Trump accomplished over the course of 4 years, rather than getting to the facts. And I think the facts really speak for themselves in a powerful way here.
Timothy, I was struck by the fact that you've got this woman today that the president embraced, and he embraced her because he was told that she was one of the people who participated in the violent insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. And she did 160 days in prison, as hundreds others have, and probably maybe hundreds more will. The gap between the criminal consequences she's faced and the criminal consequences that he's faced, although maybe that's changing now. What do you think?
Look, I think his embrace of her makes criminal charges of him more likely. Chris, the ballgame for Jack Smith is, did President Trump take action on or before January 6th with the specific intent to obstruct, impede, or interfere with the official proceeding? His embrace of people that climbed scaffolding, resisted law enforcement, were convicted of crimes, lauding them as heroes and telling them to hang in there, it's pretty direct evidence that he supports what they did. And that is Jack Smith's dream, right? A direct evidence out of the president's mouth supporting the actions of rioters. I think the more he speaks and the more he embraces convicted criminals, the better the case becomes, criminal case becomes for Jack Smith.
John, my understanding is that you are a lifelong Republican, and you have even ran for office as a kind of never Trump conservative in your state of Missouri. And I just, as someone who comes from that world, just the spectacle of this man who, Politico was writing yesterday about the fact that Republicans are kind of resigning themselves to him as a front runner, maybe the nominee, not just sort of having done what he did on January 6th, but actively saying he's considering pardons for the people who participated in it, embracing and signing the backpack of the woman, and essentially saying that he would do it again if given the chance, and that the election was still rigged, and this will be maybe the nominee for the Republican Party.
Yeah, it's really appalling what's happening right now. I think Donald Trump is nothing short of a cancer on the Republican Party. If he gets the nomination, I think he's doomed to lose to a, frankly, rather weak incumbent in Joe Biden. And I think he's just absolutely destroying the Republican Party. But at some point, people are going to tire of the chaos. They're going to revert back to the Republican Party being the party of law and order. And they're going to say they've had enough of Donald Trump. But I don't know whether that's going to happen between now and the primaries.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will probably take another loss. Or, we flip a switch and the U.S. enters a recession and you have the man sitting with the nuclear codes in the White House again. Also a complete possibility. We'll see what happens if that were to happen. Tim, I was going back over the specific crimes that the committee referred to the Department of Justice. And they include things like obstruction of an official proceeding. That's actually a charge that has been levied at a ton of folks who were in that building on that day. Conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to make a false statement, incite, assist, or aid in comfort insurrection, and other conspiracy statutes. Now, I think those go in sort of ascending order of difficulty to prosecute and complexity. But man alive, does it feel like there is a prima facie criminal case against this man?
Yeah, Chris, absolutely. The select committee believed there was a prima facie case of the violation of all of those statutes. And Jack Smith's going to get more, right? So we didn't get Mike Pence in the chair. John Wood and I were ready to examine him, develop facts for 6 or 8 hours or however long it took. We didn't get that opportunity. We got everything around him. And I think we have a sense as to what his experience was, what his position was, the tone of his conversations with the president. But Jack Smith's going to get it. So Jack Smith is going to get access to information that I think will only corroborate and strengthen the evidence of the violation of those criminal statutes. That's why I believe it's only a matter of time if Merrick Garland is true to his word that he's going to make this call based on the facts and the law, that we are looking at criminal charges, conspiratorial conduct to obstruct the official proceeding on January 6th, to make false statements with those fake elector certificates, to give aid and comfort to an insurrection, all of those offenses that we laid out in great detail in our report.